Welcome to Nutty Niche News. In the news today, we're diving into the longest government shutdown in American history and the deal that finally brought it to an end. It was a really high-stakes standoff, and honestly, it had some pretty surprising outcomes. Okay, let's get right into it. So, you have to be asking, how on earth did this happen? What did we really learn from all this? And maybe the most important question of all, where do we even go from here? We're going to tackle these three big questions to really get to the bottom of what just went down in Washington. To do that, we've boiled it all down to 5 critical takeaways. First, we'll look at why the Democrats, who seem to have all the public support, were the ones who folded. Then, we'll get into the internal fallout that's brewing inside their party. After that, we'll analyze the pretty risky tactics the Trump administration used. We'll also uncover a huge political headache this whole thing created for Republicans. And finally, we'll ask the big one, did this just completely rewrite the rulebook on government shutdowns? Okay, so let's jump right into takeaway number 1, the most immediate results of all this. When you look at how it all ended, there's just no way around it. The Democrats blinked first. They seem to be holding a super strong hand, with public opinion in their corner, but a key group within the party decided to give in. So why? And this is really what makes their choice so mind-boggling. The polling data here says it all. The Democrats weren't just fighting on principle. They had the American public squarely on their side. We're talking over 7 out of 10 Americans supported the very Obamacare subsidies they were fighting for. They were absolutely winning the blame game, and yet they still folded. So what was going through their heads? Well, this quote from Senator Angus King, who's an independent but works with the Democrats, it gives us a pretty good idea. The argument was basically that this stalemate wasn't going anywhere and was just going to cause more pain. Now, you can debate that, for sure, but what's not up for debate is that a handful of moderate Democrats just lost their nerve and decided it was time to make a deal. And that decision to cave is now causing some pretty serious problems inside the Democratic Party. It's creating all these new splits at what is, frankly, a terrible time for them. Yeah, the timing here really couldn't have been worse. This all went down right when it looked like the party was finally getting its act together. I mean, after a pretty rough year, they had some big election wins, huge protests, they were feeling unified, they had momentum. This deal, it threatens to just blow all of that up. And this really breaks down the potential damage. Internally, people are asking tough questions, like, does the party even have the stomach to really fight Trumpism? Those moderate lawmakers who cut the deal are getting absolutely hammered by the base. And you can bet we're going to see fresh calls to get rid of their Senate leader, Chuck Schumer. It's kind of funny. It looks a whole lot like the internal civil wars the Republican Party's been fighting for the last decade. All right, let's switch gears and look at the other side of this fight. For a lot of Democrats, the really frustrating part of this whole thing is that the Trump administration's aggressive, very heavy-handed pressure campaign, well, it seems like it actually worked. The administration just systematically turned up the heat in some really specific ways. They actually fought in court to stop food stamp payments from going out. They deliberately slowed down air traffic, which caused hundreds of flights to be canceled. And this was after they specifically went after what they called Democrat programs with cuts. I mean, these are tactics that really push the boundaries and in some cases just break long-standing political norms, all to get an advantage. And that brings us right back to this quote from Senator King, but it hits a little different this time. The feeling in Washington now is that these hardball tactics were success. And when our institutions fold under that kind of pressure, it just encourages that same strategy for the next fight. That's a thought that's probably keeping a lot of Democrats up at night. But while the strategy may have worked, it came with some remarkable hubris. The optics were, to put it lightly, just awful. You had the president at a fancy Great Gatsby party the night before millions of Americans were about to lose their food benefits. And promoting expensive White House renovations during a shutdown when there are signs of economic trouble, yeah, that didn't go over so well, and you could see it in his dropping approval ratings. But this all leads us to our 4th takeaway. And this one might be the silver lining for Democrats. So they might have lost the shutdown battle itself, but they may have just successfully escalated the war on a massive Republican vulnerability, healthcare. And here's why that's so important. Healthcare is arguably the GOP's single biggest political weakness. This poll makes it pretty clear. Voters trust the Democratic Party way more on healthcare than the Republican Party. So by forcing this fight over Obamacare subsidies, the Democrats put a giant spotlight on the GOP's weakest spot. And you can already see the pressure building inside the Republican Party. You had major figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene literally pleading with her own party to renew these credits. Even Trump's own pollster was warning that letting the subsidies disappear would be a political disaster. Now Republicans are going to be forced to vote on an issue that could lead directly to people's insurance premiums going up, giving Democrats a really powerful issue to run on in the 2026 midterms. Okay, this brings us to our last and maybe most important takeaway. This whole mess forces us to ask a really big question about the long-held belief in Washington that government shutdowns are always, always a political loser. For years and years, the thinking in Washington, summed up perfectly here by Mitch McConnell, was that shutdowns just don't work. They're a political disaster. The problem with past GOP shutdowns was they were fighting for stuff that wasn't very popular, like defunding Obamacare. What this shutdown showed was a whole new strategy. If you shut down the government over something that the public is overwhelmingly behind, you might actually win the political fight. So we're left with this one last massive question. We saw one party cave, another party use some pretty norm-breaking tactics to win, and a brand new playbook for political fights maybe just emerged. The huge question now is, was this just a fluke, a one-time thing, or has this shutdown permanently rewritten the rules of the game in Washington? I guess only time will tell.